situation. I'm not coming before you as an innocent man because I'm not. But at the end of the day, in '95, I got incarcerated. I got extradited from New York back down to Virginia on a fugitive warrant. I went to trial at 20 years old. I was facing life in 28 years. When the smoke cleared, I wound up getting 55 years with parole. So, through the course of that time, I became aware of a lot of things. See, prison makes two types of people. Either you're going to be a slave or you're going to be a free person. Now, we look at freedom from a standpoint of walking around, moving. Now, first type of freedom is to be free mentally. Only thing I didn't have in prison is my liberty, meaning that I couldn't leave when I wanted. But I became free real fast because I understood things. I understood that prison is designed to, for one, humiliate you, as well as make you a non-human. Nobody goes to prison and become better. You become better on your own by doing the things that you need to do. If you believe in the concept of rehabilitation, then you's a fool. Because there's no such thing as rehabilitation. If you look at what read mean to go back. So what can a black man in this country be rehabilitated to? That's something you gotta ask yourself. Now, those that really understand, they deal with the concept of transformation. When you go to prison, you analyze certain things. One thing you analyze is the way that you think. I grew up in America. My people from the South. I grew up at a certain time. So I watched cowboy flicks. I watched all the wars America was in. So what that said, might makes right. And that's the reality. So, we imitated the values of the country. They just did it on a macro level, we did it on a micro level. But the fact when we did it, they sent us to prison. We learned from them. They was the ones that taught us. So that's one of the reasons that it means something to me. Now, when anybody come up before you to give you any type of demonstration of based off their knowledge, they are experts. There's only two ways to become an expert. Either you're a trained expert through going to school and scholarship, or you're an expert through empirical knowledge. I'm an expert through empirical knowledge. Because I went through the process. I see what prisons do. And I see it from a perspective that most people probably can't even understand. And you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Nobody should. Now, right here, this is the 13th Amendment. A lot of things that go on in this country, and a lot of time, right now, prison reform is real big. Why? Because Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, is the cause of the prison explosion. That's why. So this is what the 13th Amendment says. It says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. That sounds like a lot of words. It sounds like a lot of fancy words, but at the end of the day, this amendment right here subjugate a lot of people. People think that this is the amendment that freed slaves. I beg to differ. You know what I mean? Nobody freed the slaves. The slaves freed themselves. Just for a sidebar piece, it was 180,000 black men that fought in the Union Army. There was another 29,000 that was in the Union Navy. So who freed us? Nobody. The North couldn't even win the war if the black man didn't participate. Then you had people like Harriet Tubman and others who were spies for the Union Army, because they knew the South better than anybody. How many times how many trips Harriet Tubman made to the North under the Underground Railroad? Anybody know? Nah, 19. 19. So it's like, so she knew the ins and outs, the highways and byways better than anybody. But when the 13th Amendment was enacted, somewhere around whatever they say, 1863 or something like that. Now, the 10 years after the Civil War, who know about that period? Do you know what that period is called in American history? Reconstruction, not Jim Crow. Jim Crow don't come to later. Now, Reconstruction, this was a 10-year period. Do you know how Reconstruction ended? Because it's real pivotal until to the 13th Amendment and the prison movement. Anybody ever heard of the 1877 Samuel Tilden and Ronald Hayes Compromise? That that compromise, they both was running for president. Ronald Hayes and Samuel Tilden. Now the compromise was, they was deadlocked. I don't know how they become deadlocked with electoral votes, but somehow they was deadlocked. So, Ronald Hayes told Samuel Tilden, if you want the presidency, you gotta pull your federal troops out the South and let us deal with our niggas the way we want to deal with them. So hence, federal troops got pulled out the South. Then you had the Black Codes, what became known as the Black Code, which is before Jim Crow. Now, under these Black Codes, they created all these laws that basically made being black illegal. Like they used something called vagrancy laws. You know, the stuff that I get tickets for they say you trespass and stuff like that, or you somewhere where you ain't supposed to be, back then they said that was vagrancy laws. So under the vagrancy laws, they would lock a person up. If a person went from one county to another, that's like going from Brooklyn to Queens. If a person went from what was Brooklyn and Queens, they locked them up and said they was dealing with vagrancy. Or if somebody wanted to leave and and they said that he owed some money to his so-called landowner, they locked him up. Then what the sheriff did was, of course the judge gave him a fine, $10, a $10 fine. We look at $10 today like $10 is nothing. But let me give you a little reference point. In the 80s, you could still buy penny candy. You can still pay 25 cents to play an arcade game. This is in the 80s. 10 cents you get now later. Eat 3 now, say something later. So this is in the 80s. So imagine what $10 looked like in 1870, 1888. That probably was like $1,000. So sheriffs was selling labor. Who they were selling the labor to? They were selling it to corporations. They were selling it to plantations. They were selling it to miners. They were selling it to the people that cut the trees down and make paper. Anything you could name that was a corporation in the South, they sold these black people, whether it was men, whether it was children, and some women, but mainly men, to these corporations. And the thing about it is, think about the psychological aspect, because we don't really see it and understand. Now, imagine that the black man that was leaving his house to go look for work and got locked up on this and didn't come back. What his wife thought, what his children thought. Oh, the black man ain't shit because he left us. The whole time he got locked up in another county, you know, and then he got his labor sold. They said more lives was lost during the convict leasing program than it was during slavery. Think about that for a minute. So now you got the black woman talking about the black man ain't shit, but the whole time he kidnapped somewhere and doing some hard labor, and next thing you know, he dead. So he never came back, because you don't come back from dead. You know, this ain't the Walking Dead, ain't no zombies around here. So it's like, yo, that's another thing. So now, I want y'all to listen and think real quick. This is a real short, click on the link. Real short, and I want you to watch. It's from the 13th. It's a video on Netflix, a documentary that came out. And this is just the trailer, but the trailer is packed with information.
1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled, in the world are locked up here in the land of the free.
Khalif Browder was walking home from a party when he was stopped by police.
Then they said, we're going to take you to the precinct, and most likely we're going to let you go home, and then I never went home.
13th Amendment to the Constitution makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions, including criminals.
The loophole was immediately exploited. What you got after that was a rapid transition to a mythology of black criminality.
Animals, beasts that needed to be controlled.
You better believe it.
It became virtually impossible for a politician to run and appear soft on crime.
The kinds of kids that are called super predators.
Millions of dollars will be allocated for prison and jail facilities.
3 strikes and you are out. There's a new
enormous burden on the black community, but it also violated a sense of core fairness.
The states were required to keep these prisons filled, even if nobody was committing a crime.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized. The focus is on taking people from prison, putting them in community corrections, parole, probation.
How much progress is it really now there's a private company making money off the GPS monitor?
We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves back in the 1850s.
We are the products of the history that our ancestors chose. Products of that set of choices that we have to understand in order to escape from.